Welcome back to Photoshop. We're going to start our biggest unit of the year, which is painting and drawing. Don't worry if you don't have a lot of artistic skill. We're going to be starting nice and easy with a coloring book lesson here. So let's get started. File open. Go to the courses folder, art, computer graphic lessons, Photoshop lessons. In here, there should be a folder called paintbrush lesson. And we're going to open up the first two files, 04 end and 04 start. And let's see what we're doing here. So as you can see, we're going to be doing some basic coloring and painting here. I'm going to show you some special effects tricks, but yours is going to look considerably different because I'm going to let you play and have some fun with your colors. All right, on our start file, let's start off by saving this. Let's go to File, Save As. We're going to save this in our folder, in our computer graphics folder, and let's go to Lessons, and I would like you to call it Painting and Drawing. All right, so we're ready to begin. In Photoshop, you have to remember one really important thing is when you see white, that does not necessarily mean clear or transparent. It means white pixels or white paint. And we want to have a nice, simple black line layer without any other color on it, just black line layer. So we need to delete the white space. And I'm going to show you a really simple and easy trick to do that because when we start our project, eventually when we get past these lessons, you are going to start with a line drawing of some kind and you will have to start by deleting the white space. So let's get started. Easiest way to do it. We're going to go up to Select, Color Range. This works just like the Magic Wand tool, but instead of just clicking in one area, it's going to select every pixel that's on that layer that of the color that you picked. So take your little eyedropper tool and anywhere in the image, I want you to click on the white space. It may or may not look like anything changes in here, but once you click on the white space, a thumbnail of this should show up in here. I would just leave the fuzziness slider set in the middle. It's not going to look like anything happened, but then click OK. And you should get marching ants. So it has selected all of the white pixels in this entire image. Well, now we would delete these, but if I hit my delete key right now, this comes up. What this is telling me is that, hey, you're on a background layer. There's nothing underneath this. I can't delete it. What do you want me to do? So I'm going to show you a shortcut. Before you hit the delete key with your white still selected, we're going to rename this layer in the layers panel because right now, see, it says background. It has a lock. It doesn't let you delete from the background layer. So in order to delete, we're going to double click on the word background and I want you to call this line layer. Click OK. Now hit your delete key and you should get a checkerboard. So stop the video and do that now. Okay, with our area still selected, we're going to darken our black lines, and I'm going to show you a really quick and easy way to do that. We're going to go up to Select, Inverse. So now it has everything except that empty space selected. I'm going to reset my default color, so I'm going to click on this little button over here where it shows black on white, and it's going to reset my default colors black as my foreground, white as my background. I'm going to grab a brush tool. I'm going to come up to my brush size. I want to pick a very basic round brush. And I'm going to leave my pixel size about 36. And I'm just going to brush across where my black lines are because I want to make them a little bit darker, a little bit more solid because there were some grayed areas. Just be careful. Don't go over your margin. Don't go over that green and blue border on the outside because that area is selected too. So just go ahead. We're just darkening in those black lines. It's going to make things easier when we start making selections later to color that. All right, and then we're going to go to Select, Deselect. So it should look something like this. All right. Before we start coloring in, we have to fill in parts of our drawing because not all of our drawing is in here. We're missing the bottom part of the cactus because we want to think about having closed-in shapes, and we have some open-ended lines here. We're not going to use the paintbrush tool. Instead, we're going to pull out that drawing. We're going to grab the pencil tool, leave your default color set to black, And let's take our brush size down to, or our pencil size down to about 3 pixels. And I want you to come in and I want you to just draw a line and connect the bottom part of that cactus. Okay, great. Now we're, we're going to draw in a horizon line. So in other words, we need to separate the sky from the sand or the sky from the ground. And we're going to start over here to the right. And it doesn't matter where, just pick a spot on the right. I want you to click, hold down your mouse button, and I want you to hold down the shift key and drag. Now notice I can move my cursor way up and way down, but it's keeping it completely straight. Do that until you get to the nose of your coyote and then release both the shift and your mouse button. And then I want you to pick up on the other side of the nose of that coyote. And this time draw it freehand. I don't want you to do a straight line. We're just going to put some slight curves. And I'm just picking up my mouse button to draw that line out. All right, so stop the video and do that now. All right, excellent. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to erase using the eraser tool. Let's go ahead and zoom in on the clouds up top. And notice we've got some stray lines here. We're going to go ahead and grab the eraser tool. It works just like a brush, so we can change the brush size up here up top. And I want you to erase any stray those little black lines there in your clouds. That's how your eraser tool works. Real simple, just like a brush, but it's going to erase whatever's on that layer. All right, double click the hand tool to zoom all the way out. And at this point, let's go to File, Save. We just need to save where we're at. All right, we're going to start moving on to actually adding some color now. So I want to show you, before we add color, I want to show you all the different places you can go to get color, because there's lots of different places. There's 2 different panels you can use. You can use the up in window. You can open up both the color and the swatches. And you'll notice when you open them up, they typically are docked together. But there are slight differences in these. Color is a basic spectrum. So if I click on my eyedropper here, notice it's changing my foreground color by clicking. I can also drag my sliders. So the color panel is one way that you can change your color. Another way is in your swatches panel. So swatches panels are pre-saved different colors, and there's different libraries that if you click on the drop down, notice, let's say I'm working for a company and they're like, hey, you're going to use a certain Pantone color for our product. I want it to be this exact Pantone color, which is Pantone 1645. I can load it so I know I got the exact shade and color that they're looking for. So that's in your swatches panel. I'm going to reset that to my basics. The other way that I can change my foreground color or pick a color is to simply double click on the foreground color, and that's going to give me the color picker. And I can slide around and grab a color. Most of us have already kind of played around with this. If I knew the exact formula or recipe for the color, I could type it in here. A fourth way is if you already have color on your image and you want to sample. So let's say I'm going to paint my coyote and I want a certain shade of blue that's out here somewhere. In the toolbox, there's this tool here called the eyedropper tool. If I click on that and I click somewhere on this outside margin where this color is, notice it sets it as the preset setting. So go ahead and do that now. Stop, grab your color pick or the eyedropper tool, and I want you to select a color somewhere around the outside border. Okay. Now, let's say this is a color that I'm going to use repeatedly throughout my painting, and I want to make sure I save it. And it would be really hard to sample that exact spot because this is a gradient. I don't know if I'll get on the exact, even you can see it here. If I'm trying to click, it keeps changing on me just a little bit. So I can save a color, and where you do that is in your swatches. So all I have to do is once I have my color selected in my foreground color, you're going to come over into the gray space. So you can extend this panel if you need to. You're going to come to the gray space and notice when I let my cursor hover, I get a little paint bucket. If I click, this dialog box is going to come up. It's going to say, hey, you're going to add a new swatch. And now you can call it. So I'm going to call this my Coyote Blue and click OK. Now notice it gets added into my swatch. And if I hover over it, it should say Coyote Blue. So that's how you save colors in your swatches panel. They are only saved for that file though. If I were to open up a different Photoshop file, those colors would not be in the swatches panel. The swatches panel saves with the individual file. Okay, so that's super important to know. Okay, so we're going to start actually adding some colors. We're going to start by coloring in our cactus. But before we do that, because some of us aren't great about staying in the lines. Some of us could just paint this freehand, but let's say we're not so great. Well, we can cheat. Okay, it's Photoshop. We can cheat a little bit on our coloring. But before we do that, we need to make a selection. So we're going to start by grabbing our magic wand tool, and I want you to click on the inside of that cactus. And notice because we have this nice thick black border, it stops the selection. Now, I do not want you to paint on your line layer. This is where it's really important that you make sure that you're doing this step by step. So we're going to select on the line layer, but before we paint our cactus, I want to click on the new layer button, and we're going to call this the cactus layer. Now, with our cactus still selected, with any way you know how, I want you to select a color for your cactus. It doesn't have to be green. It can be whatever color you want it to be. And we're going to fill it with a new tool, the paint bucket tool, which is right here. Keyboard shortcut is G. It's in the same drawer with the gradient tool. And all you have to do is click, and it should fill it, right? Perfect. Let's go ahead and deselect. All right, now we want to select that little itty bitty part of the cactus that didn't get selected in there. So we would grab our magic wand tool, but watch what's going to happen. If I click, notice, whoa, wait, why is it selecting everything? Well, because of what layer I'm on. I'm on my cactus layer. The only thing that's on that cactus layer is this. So when I selected that area, notice it selects everything around it. This is a great example that you need to make sure that you're on the right layer when you're doing things. So for this lesson, whenever we select, you have to be on the line layer. So you select on the line layer, but before you paint, you need to switch to the layer that you want the paint on. So go ahead and select on the line layer, switch back to the cactus layer, pick a color, or you can use the same color, it doesn't matter, and go ahead and with the fill bucket, paint in that last little part of your cactus. Excellent. Let's go to File, Save. Okay, so now we're going to have a little bit of fun here. We're going to paint some texture onto our cactus. So I want you to stay on the cactus layer, grab your magic wand tool, hold down Shift, and I want you to select the larger part. So right now we've selected both little halves of our cactus here, right? Let's go ahead and grab back to our brush tool. And let's talk a little bit about the brush tool before we go any further. So most of us pretty intuitively can figure out up here, you've got your basic size. Okay, for your brush, you can make it bigger and smaller. You can pick a different brush. You can also load different brush libraries. So that's in the settings, the little manual settings button up here. I want you to go ahead and I want you to load the assorted brushes panel. Click OK to this. Oops, sorry. You don't want to click OK because I already had it loaded. And as you scroll down, notice we've got some different shaped brushes. I want you to grab, I don't really care, just grab a different shaped brush of any kind and then come over into the image and you can see approximately how big that brush is going to be. So again, I can make it bigger or smaller if I want to. If I happen to have accidentally clicked on the caps lock button, you're going to notice, wait, where did that shape go? It's still there. If you hit caps locks, it's going to give you the crosshairs, the very center point to where that paintbrush shape is, because sometimes if you get really big, it's hard to tell where the center of it is and where exactly you're going to paint. So that's the caps locks. I'm just showing you that in case for some reason you can't tell what size brush or you lose the shape of the brush, it's because your caps lock key is on. Okay. Let's go ahead and select a different shade of whatever color you're working with. And with our aerosol selected, I just want you to click and stamp some texture all over your cactus. Stop the video, do that now. Okay, let's go ahead and deselect this. We're going to turn off our line layer for just a second so you can kind of see what's happening here. Make sure you're still on your cactus layer, and we are going to apply a filter. So we're going to go up to Filter, Filter Gallery, and let's stay up in the artistic filters. And I want you to just pick a filter that you kind of find visually interesting and click OK. So why did we didn't have to have anything selected here? Why? Because that's the only thing that's on that layer. So the filter's only going to affect the green pigment that was on that layer. It didn't affect anything on the line layer because we weren't on that layer. All right, go to File, Save. All right, let's go ahead and move on. We are going to be painting our coyote. So step one is we have to select the coyote. How do we do that? Remember, you have to click back on your line layer, grab your magic wand tool, click on his head, and then we have to add to all of this. So hold down the Shift key, because remember, Shift is add, click on his body, and still holding down Shift, click on his tail. But before you paint, what do you have to do? That's right, new layer, and let's call this the coyote layer. Now, with your coyote selected, make sure you're on your coyote layer. Let's go ahead and grab our brush tool. Let's go back to our brushes panel up at the top. Let's grab just a very basic size brush, about size 38. Pick a color for your coyote. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to my swatches and I'm going to pick my coyote blue that I sampled. And again, double check, make sure you're on the coyote layer. And this is the fun part. See, I can't even color outside the lines even if I wanted to because I've got a nice selection border. All right, now that we've got our coyote painted, we're going to apply some texture here as well. Same way we did with the cactus, but I'm going to show you a slightly different technique this time around. So let's go ahead and grab our brush, or with our brush tool, let's go back up to our brushes panel. Excuse me. But this time, let's go ahead and I want you to open up a new panel. It's the expanded brushes panel. There's two ways you can get to this panel. The quickest and easiest way is to click on the shortcut button, which is right here next to the drop down under the options bar for the brushes. And when you do, you will get an expanded brush. You can also go up to Window and open up brushes. Okay. When you open it up, you get both the brushes and the brush presets set up. Your brush presets are exactly what's up here. We want the brushes panel, the expanded brushes panel, because there's some extra options in here. You have a lot of options when it comes to the brush tool. You can not only just change the shape and the size, but you can change things like scattering and all these other effects. And that's what we're going to talk about. And I want you to feel free to really play with these whenever you can during this video lesson. Feel free to play with these effects. So by default, when you click on it, you're going to have shape dynamics and transfer, probably smoothing selected in here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to mess around with the scattering. So the first thing we need to do is we are going to change to a different shape brush again. Let's go ahead and go to brush presets and grab a different shaped brush, something with a little bit of texture. I don't care what that looks like. I'm going to do this one here. Okay. And then click back on the expanded brushes panel. I want you to go ahead and dial the size down. We don't want it real big. We want it smaller than his head. Okay, so make your size smaller. And then we're going to turn on the scattering options. I want you to click on scattering, and you're going to notice all of a sudden it shows you a little thumbnail of what this would look like. So I've got these up and down little texture lines, but I'm going to show you how you can change it a little bit. Click on the word scattering in this box, and it's going to let you control some options. So I can change the count. So how many it's going to scatter in there. I can control what's called the jitter. This one doesn't actually let me. Change my jitter. Some of them do, some of them don't. Let me try a different brush real fast. There we go. So click back on Shape Dynamics if it doesn't let you do it in here, and it should let you change and angle. There we go. Under Angle Jitter, see how it changes and rotates? So it took me a little bit to figure out where that was, but that's okay. So again, make sure your scattering is on. Click on Shape Dynamics, and once scattering is on, it should have let you change the jitter, how it turns in there. All right. Go ahead and collapse that panel. Before you paint on your coyote, I want you to pick a very contrasting color, something that's going to look quite a bit different than what you have. And now I'm just going to click and drag, and you're going to notice it scatters it almost like a spray can. It's going to scatter in your texture. Stop the video and try that now. All right, we're going to stay here again. Before we do this, I want to click on a new layer button. Okay, new layer. So we've got layer one stacked right on top of Coyote. I want you same brush, same scattering effect. I want you to pick a different color now. Another, a third color that's got some variation, some difference. And I want you to spray one more time. Good. Now we're going to make some changes here. Let's go ahead and we can deselect. We don't need our marching ants anymore. And on the layer one, which was our new little scattering, the contrasting color, let's take the opacity down a little bit so it's not so stark. So it's kind of blending through just the littlest bit. Stop the video, try that now. All right, and now we want to merge these two together. So click on layer one, hold down your select key or your shift key, and click on Coyote. Right click and go to merge layers. So now that's all one. Go ahead and double click and let's rename this Coyote again. Excellent. All right. We're going to move on. This time we're going to paint freehand, and it's okay. Don't freak out. We're not going to make a selection, so we don't need to click on the line layer first, but we do need to create a new layer. So let's click the new layer button, and we're going to call this mountains. Now, by default, it will probably be at the top of your stacking order. That's awesome. Okay. Go ahead and through any method that you know how now, I want you to select a color for your mountain range. Again, you can be realistic or have fun. I don't care. Pick a color. Before we start painting, let's go ahead and reset our color, our basic shape. I want you to go grab basic brushes. We're going to reload basic brushes. And let's select just a basic round brush. About, I would say 9 pixels is probably a good size. We've got our color, but now we're going to do a different effect. So let's open up that expanded brushes panel again. Where was it? Right. Here's our button right up at the top. We're going to click and open that. This time, instead of going to scattering, we're not going to be on scattering. I want you to click on wet edges. So you'll notice with the wet edges, there's no controls, there's no options. All wet edges does is it takes it and changes it from like a basic acrylic paintbrush to a watercolor brush. So that means you're going to see your paint strokes. You're going to see whenever you overlap, if you've ever done any kind of staining or worked with watery media, wherever your lines overlap, it's going to get a little bit darker. So if you need to, if you want to zoom in on your mountain range a little bit, you can. And with this paintbrush tool set on wet edges, I want you to just paint. Now, don't worry, I'm painting over the black lines. I'm even painting outside the black lines a little bit. It's all right. Go ahead and paint in your mountain range with one basic color. And it's okay if you go over the nose of your coyote. We're going to fix all that. Notice where I overlapped, I get some darkening color. Now I want you to take a couple minutes here and I want you to play. I want you to change your colors. I want you to try to get some layering in here. Try to get some darks and lights. You can even change your brush size, all still on wet edges. I just want to make my mountains look nice and rocky. Painting in different strokes. Take your time, have some fun. Some of us are doing a better job than others. That's okay. Don't worry, this is going to look beautiful when we're done. Okay, now that you have your mountains painted in our stacking order, all you have to do is click and drag it down underneath your line layer. And those black lines, wow, looks beautiful. Now let's just clean up our edges. Make sure you're on your mountain range. Grab your eraser tool, set it to a decent size, so probably about 7 or 8, and now go ahead and erase. Erase your edges where you want outside. And notice it's not erasing any of my black lines. Why? Because I'm on the mountains layer. Those black lines are on the line layer. So that's why separating things out on layers is so beneficial. All right, let's go ahead and go to File, Save, if you haven't done so recently. Let's zoom out and see what we've got so far. All right, so just as a quick review, we've talked about the pencil tool and how to make a straight line. We have learned how to sample colors and save them in our swatches panel. We have learned how to select a color and delete. We've learned the scattering options and some of the other advanced options with the brush tool and lots of ways to select color. Two things before we finish today is whenever you're done with your brush tool at the end of the day, you want to reset that. So grab your paintbrush tool, open that panel, and you're going to want to reset. So I would say clear brush controls. Why? Because it's going to reset everything. Otherwise, it's going to go back to whatever last thing you did. So if you happen to have had wet edges on, it's going to still have wet edges on when you come back the next day. It doesn't clear when you close. And sometimes you're like, oh, why did that do that? It's because somebody, whoever was at that computer last, changed the settings on the brush tool. Okay, so that's what I would always do. I would reset the brushes panel. All you do is put clear brush controls and it'll go back to normal. And then the last thing I want to show you today is something called your transparency and gamut. So remember at the beginning of the lesson when we deleted the white space and we got this checkerboard. That's because checkerboard in Photoshop means clear. It means there's nothing there. We can change this a little bit. Depending on the image that you're working with, you may want to change your checkerboard to be bigger or smaller squares, or you might even want to change the color. So here's how you do it. I'm just going to show you this, play around with this. It's not that big of a deal, but some people do like to know how to edit this. So if I want to change my checkerboard, and remember the checkerboard does not print, it's not really there. We go up to Edit, Preferences, Transparency and Gamut. In here, you can see, and I'm going to move this to the right so you can see. So I can change my grid size. I can make it really small. I can medium, which is what it was set on. I can go to large. I could even change the colors. So I can go light, I go to medium, I go to dark. I could even change it so I can do red squares or pink squares, blue squares. It's totally up to you. If you want to change it, you can. You'll also notice if the checkerboard is annoying, you can even turn it off by clicking on none. I typically tell people don't do that because then you start to confuse, well, what's white paint and what is clear? So I like to have the checkerboard. I think it makes things a little bit easier for me to visually see where I still need to add paint. Okay, that's it. After this video, you're going to go on to the second half of this video, but make sure you save before you're done here. And good job.